Subscribe for all stories dangerous, weird, or altogether unexplainable. Have a weird or scary true story? Leave in the comments section for a chance to be in a video. What was your creepy, unexplained experience as a child? Haven't told this one in a while. I was young, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. I was sleeping in between my parents for whatever reason. I woke up. I remember the clock reading around 4 AM. There was something standing by the window, looking out into the front yard. It looked like a man in a brown wool robe, about 6 feet 4 inches or so. I started to stir and sat up in bed, and the thing turned and looked at me. Dear God, that face, extremely pale white skin, lots of really pronounced wrinkles, and the face drooped like it was melting, down into a really pointy chin. Almost similar to a scream mask but with all of the features of a living being. Its mouth was hanging open and its eyes were wide, almost like it was worried or frightened. It kept its gaze on me while it moved away from the window, in front of the bed, and out the open bedroom door. The second it exited the room, the lights turned on their own and both of my parents jumped up on either side of me, breathing heavily like they'd both just woken up from a nightmare. To be clear, I was fully able to move during this. I don't think it was sleep paralysis, but I'm not sure what it could have been other than some kind of demon or really fucking ugly ghost. I've never seen it since, but I can still picture it clear as day. I had a very similar experience as a child. I was so frightened I tried to be as still and quiet as I could so it wouldn't see me, but it looked right at me. It was the first time in my life that I realized how vulnerable me and my family were. Not sure if it was an hallucination or bad dream, but it was terrifying. This happened to me as well. I swear this happened. I was young, in elementary school, and I looked out the window of my room late at night. There was a guy standing there in a tattered suit. He was really tall and bald and was looking straight at me from down on the sidewalk under the lamp. His face was eerily white and his eyes were red. It was terrifying. I ran to tell my parents and dragged them to the window but no one was there. It's a suburban area and no one is ever out that late. To this day I still have trouble sleeping in my bedroom for fear of that thing. I'm 24 now. I was like 9 years old. I was sleeping in my parents' bed. At that point I think it was a Saturday morning and my dad had gone bike riding with his friends real early and I woke up and got in bed with my mom. I was having a bad dream and I woke up and looked around and went to go pee. When I got back into the bed there was a white pale hand waving at me from behind the closet. I thought I was dreaming but I was so shocked I couldn't do anything. I kind of put it in the back of my mind until a year later my older cousin said she had seen a hand waving at her behind her mirror when I was at her house. It made me realize I really experienced it and didn't imagine it. When I was really little, maybe 3 or 4, I used to swear I would see Jesus' image light up on the wall next to my bed and it would talk to me. This happened several times, and horrified me each time, until one night I asked God to stop it from happening because it was scaring me. Never came back. My family lives in a super rural part of East Tennessee, and we have a family homestead that's been passed down for generations called the Turley house. Legend in the family has it that it was a Civil War hospital, which I can totally see because it's absolutely ancient and creepy. We also have a legend in the family that we're all haunted by a demon slash spirit slash God knows what called Wool Eyes. He's so prominent in our family's history that he's just a fact of life at this point, so it's not unusual to hear somebody say something like, "Oh look, Wool Eyes is at it again, he must be upset." One of the creepy experiences I had growing up here is the never-ending rosebush. There were 2 rose bushes on the corner of the house that weren't very big. I have some distinct memories of playing around them and getting absolutely batshit lost in the rose bushes, running in circles for hours and hours at a time. It was sort of like that scene in Spirited Away when Chihiro and Haku are running through the flower hedges. Eventually I would find my way out, but it would be hours later and my mom would be hella angry that I was gone for so long. I never really thought much of it because kid logic, but I asked my mom about it years later and she said that all the kids in the family have stories about getting lost in the same spot. Everybody always blamed it on Wool Eyes, saying he was just having fun messing around. Wish I could go back and explore the house some. It's got some crazy stories through the years. Please, tell more about Wool Eyes. Well, Eyes is a pretty cool legend. Everyone claims to have had some interaction with him before in one way or another. When I was little, I remember being pushed on the porch swing by a guy in a big coat, but I could never focus on what he looked like. I just knew he was there. I also remember seeing him upstairs and got spooked because I wasn't allowed up there. My parents have had worse encounters. My mom talks about him watching her sleep at night and pushing her friend down the staircase and breaking her arm. Apparently there was also one time he imitated a family member out in the backfield and chased her back to the house where the real person was waiting. When my parents were dating, Dad said he spent the night there once and came down the stairs to get water, and there was a man in a wool trench coat and a large hat sitting at the table. He looked up at him and said, "This isn't your fucking house. You have 5 seconds to leave." And then he got up and went into the basement. Dad told me he left my mom there and all his clothes and drove away that instant. Lol, he hasn't been since. Won't even drive down the road the house is on. Apparently he also likes to pick favorites and takes care of them. My deceased grandfather was supposedly one of his favorites, and when we brought his casket back for the wake, really random old tradition, the house was in a total uproar. Power outages, storms, no cell service, things breaking. It was intense. He's never heard him either, just messed around like with the rose bush incident and popped the lock on the basement door when my uncle locked me down there as a practical joke. I also have some crazy intense luck when it comes to life-threatening situations, so everyone jokes he's keeping me safe. Rumor has it my great-grandmother struck a deal with him and that's why he never bothered her. When she died nobody wanted the house, but her son Harold took it. He's recently been missing and now the house is up for grabs again. So I guess you can think what you will on that one since nobody really knows what happened to him. Personally, I'd love to get my hands on that house and check out Eyes now that I am an adult, but my mom swore she'd beat me to death if I tried to live there a little still. At some point I want to sneak back out there and explore the house and finally get up to the 2nd and 3rd floors that I was banned from as a little kid. Till this day, I don't know if they were a series of fucked up dreams or if it was reality, but when I was around 6 to 7, my family and I lived in a 2-story house with all the bedrooms upstairs. My mom would always send me to her room to collect nappies. My brother had just been born, and of course, my parents' room was at the very end of the hallway. I remember I had this distinct feeling that I could never recall. I just knew it when I felt it. The feeling was a warning sign that it was coming. Don't ask what the fuck it was because I had no clue. When it was coming, I would get comfortable, lie on a bed or sit down, and close my eyes. I had to close my eyes though. Under no circumstances were they to be open. I felt like it was forbidden to look at it. It was like a set of rules that I had to follow or else something would happen. I was too scared to question it. It would slowly come in. The feeling would grow as it got closer, and it would come from the hallway through the door. I felt like it was floating because I could never hear footsteps. It would literally just talk to me, like that's it. The subject would range from small talk to something extremely creepy, my mother's death. It would usually ask me questions like how was your day, but I would never answer because, again, I was scared to death. At this point, I would wait and listen until I couldn't feel its presence anymore. Only then would it be safe to open my eyes and move. It was weird because I seemed to forget the experience until the next one. After it left, I would just continue on with what I was doing like nothing had happened. The only time I'd actually acknowledge it was when the feeling would wash over me and I'd realize that I fucked up by being alone. I really don't remember much. That one nappy experience always stood out though. Everything would kind of blur together. Pretty much all my memories from then are like that. I only remember my thoughts and feelings at that time. I don't even know. As a kid we played in the basement a lot. The floor was open in cement so we could roller skate around. Also the walls were either dirt or bricks so we were allowed to shoot BB guns at targets. Basically, I wasn't scared of the basement at all as a kid. One day my sister was in a side room that had jars of peaches and pickles. Dirt cellar type room. Stayed cold even in the summer. She wouldn't let me in and I was sure she was eating peaches. I could see her feet under the crack of the door and I stuck my fingers under and she messed around with my fingers and giggled. I felt that her fingers were wet and I said don't eat all the peaches, I want some. Then she pushed down on my fingers so hard and it hurt and she was groaning and basically freaking out. I started screaming and tugging. Finally I pulled my hands back and she was quiet. She then kicked the door really hard. I ran upstairs to tell on her and there she was with my mom in the kitchen. It was pretty fucking freaky. No one believed me. In fact, my mom just said my imagination had gotten away from me and to forget about it. Walking home from school and noticing a man follow me, I took a shortcut near the church in hopes that a church member would be there. It was empty, and I swear I saw my uncle, who passed 3 years prior, standing there waiting for me. The man turned away and I held this figure's hand for a good minute before my mom walked up to me asking me what I was doing. My hand was holding nothing but terror. When I was 10 years old, I stayed the summer with my aunt Joan in Heath, Ohio. Her home was really old and spooky. It had the creaky doors, dark basement, attic, and standard horror movie vibe going on. Lots of my relatives were freaked out being there, but I always enjoyed it. My aunt and I were preparing dinner one night when a framed picture in the dining room fell off the wall. I asked who the bearded man in their photo was since I hadn't seen them before. She firmly told me to not ask about the person in the photo because they died angry, and stayed angry. Okay then. About halfway through dinner, my aunt went into the kitchen to get dessert, so I took the opportunity to ask Uncle Mark about the guy in the photo. He stopped chewing and looked at me with annoyance clearly written on his face. "What did your aunt say about that damn thing?" he barked. I kind of winced because Uncle Mark was typically a very low-key kind of guy. My aunt walked into the dining room, ready to chastise me as well, when a dish towel on the table began to smolder, finally erupting into flames. Uncle Mark slowly stood up and smothered it with his napkin. He didn't say a word to me, but he promptly raised his voice to his wife in the other room. Neither one mentioned it again, and I wasn't invited back for anything other than whole family trips. My Uncle Mark is nearly 90 now and has suffered from dementia for some time. My only interaction is to send him a card once a month. Dude loves him so kitten or puppy cards. Last Christmas he was pretty chatty and I got the nerve to ask about that night from my youth. He became very still and asked me, "Do you want James to burn this whole effing house down?" My parents both told me to let it go. An Aussie friend of my father traveled to our country back in the 80s and gave my father an African wooden mask he bought from the tribe in one of his travels there, back in 1998 or something, where I was 6 years old. My parents decided to put that mask on the wall next to my bed. I want to note from now that this mask had nothing scary in it. It was kind of funny, to be honest. Never triggered anything creepy in me to blame the following things in a subconscious fear I had for the mask. After some time the mask was placed above me, I started having not so restful sleeps, but nothing creepy other than that. Never connected this with the mask's placement above me. Then the shit begins, with my first nightmare with the mask. I was in an unspecified dark abyss, where the only highlighted things were me and the mask, which was floating 3 to 4 meters above and opposite of me. It started blazing with fire, and some freakish wailings were flooding the scene. Imagine the sounds as if you mourn loudly with a sore throat, inside a plastic bucket but with X5 the volume. The mask was getting hoochie and hoochie, until it reached gargantuan sizes. After that I woke up dripping in sweat. From that day I started fearing the mask. Then sometime later, it was an occasion where I slept at my parents' room. The mask was still in my room. The thing I remember is that sometime at night I woke up and saw from the open door my parents eating in the living room, something they used to do a lot, and that I tried to get up and join the feast, but an echoing voice, like that of the previous dream, shouted, "No!" And an invisible force pushed me violently on the bed and had me there, like telling me, "No food for you little shit," and the balcony door shutters kinda collapsing and getting stuck midway. I remember crying and losing my senses, and then the next morning waking up, the shutters were down all the way, something that rarely my parents did, and I told my father about the mask. He was telling me it's just dreams, but I insisted, so they took it down. The night the mask was gone, I had my first full sleep, and I remember it was a Saturday morning and I watched Darkwing Duck. There might have been something attached to that mask. My mother told me of a time where she had gone over to a friend's place, because her friend was so upset because they were having troubles in their marriage. Friend was telling her all about it on the way there, and my mother had offered to go inside to pray about it. As soon as they walked into the living room, my mother zoomed in on a figure. It was something like a grumpy old man in a yellow raincoat on a roof of the house. My mother asked what it was, and it was apparently a gift from one of the married two, and my mom made them throw it out right there. Didn't have a marital problem after that. Well, I was too young to really remember this, but my parents told me about it when I was very young. maybe between 2 to 4 years old. I was sitting on my dad's lap while he was reading a book. In this book, there was an illustration of an alien, the typical gray, big head, big eyes, spindly limbs alien. I proceeded to point at this illustration and say the teddy bears. My dad asked me what I meant, and I explained to him that those were the teddy bears who would come into my room at night and take me for rides in their helicopter, which turned out to look suspiciously not like a helicopter. At that point in my life, I had never seen any sort of alien stuff that my parents weren't aware of. I was then obsessed with that picture of the teddy bear in the book, and kept looking at it when I could find it. I was about 14, living on a cul-de-sac with a sewer rain gutter thing by the curb. My sister was having a sleepover with one of her friends and they decided to go TP some of these kids' houses, so we sneak out in like 2 AM and do the deed. We come back to the house and are trying to sneak back into the house, which is basically going through the side gate to the garage. For some reason, I was the last one by the car and they were almost in the garage. I'm trying to be as quiet as I can when all of a sudden I hear a girl scream from one of the sewers. The scream wasn't loud enough for it to wake anyone up and she screamed 2 times. I was frozen. Then I heard a man yell, "Shut your fucking mouth," from the sewer. I noped the fuck out of the front yard and ran straight into my room. Asked my sister and her friend the next morning and they did the same exact thing. When I was around 5 or 7 years old, a bunch of kids from the same neighborhood were always walked to the school or kindergarten accompanied by a parent. There was pretty high traffic street we had to cross with no signals whatsoever. Mind you, that was before pedestrians had the right of way. One day we were waiting to cross the street and just as I was about to start walking, an old man in black clothes wearing one of those weird round top hats told me, "Wait, don't go now," so I waited. He started crossing the street and as soon as he was on the other side, he turned around, looked at me and said, "Now you can walk." I happily complied and took 2 steps on the road when I heard screeching tires. I looked to my left and there was a car that almost ran me over. I remembered how the old man walked away. I told this exact story to the parent that walked with us. She told me there was no old man there. I was supposedly just running on the street with no one else around. Moral of the story: don't trust old men with weird round top hats.